Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We got to talk about that win the Steelers had against the Falcons, elite defense, Justin Fields' quarterback situation, and the offensive line take a step forward. All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. More on them later. Steelers fans, it's a victory Monday. The Pittsburgh Steelers go into Atlanta and get the dub 18-10 over the Atlanta Falcons, starting the season 1-0. And boy, was that old school Steelers football very much how they've had to win the past several seasons. I guess 3. It's not several. You get my point. But bottom line, Steelers had the script, stuck to the script, got it done. I'm going to get to Justin Fields and the offense in a minute here because that is a big part of this. But I think the story that shows the potential of this team that comes out of this game is, boy, did that defense look good. I know there were some times you're a little nervous. There were a couple runs, like the 13-yard run by Algier and the 13-yard run by DeShon Robinson. You're a little nervous. But by and large, they shut it down in this game. Held DeShon Robinson to under 4 yards per carry, 18 carries for 68 yards. Like I said, I told you all week long, their history with Kirk Cousins, they get 2 interceptions. The key is, will they be able to stuff the run outside of those 2 interceptions? They did, and Kirk Cousins threw those 2 interceptions. TJ Watt had a fumble recovery. Should have had 2 with a strip sack. We'll get to those penalties in a little bit. But by and large, this defense was a difference maker. And I haven't even had the chance to go over the all-22 yet so I could assess just how important so many different levels of the defense were. There were, I think, just from first glance of watching it on television, I could see differences made by Minkah Fitzpatrick because he was allowed to roam and do so much more things. Like there were the play where he stuffed DeShon Robinson just in front of the line of scrimmage, looked really impressive with how far deep he was able to come from. The things Alex Highsmith could do, things Cam Hayward could do. By the way, they were both playmakers in this game. DeShon Elliott's interception, but also Joey Porter Jr., at least from what I was able to see, I still haven't seen the all-22. I thought he did a really good job in coverage. Looked like he wasn't a liability. The Steelers at large, I think they more than controlled the tempo of this game on defense, held the Falcons to 2 of 9 on third downs. And again, that's with a veteran quarterback, and that's with all these playmakers that were supposed to make the Steelers basically, shaking their boots this week. DeShon Robinson limited him all game. He did get over 100 yards from scrimmage, but 5 catches for 43 yards, 18 carries for 68 yards. You could take that. Kyle Pitts, 3 catches, 26 yards, did have a touchdown, but by and large, nothing big there. Drake London, the major receiver they were supposed to worry about, 2 catches, 15 yards, 3 targets, no problem. Overall, you allow 155 yards through the air. You get 3 turnovers in this game. The defense more than did its job to win this game. And I really think that, again, it's the composition of the defense that makes the world a difference here for the Steelers. It's the fact that their D-line does have a rotation to it. They have the edge rushers. And look at the end of this game, because I do think, and we're going to touch a little bit on the offense and how it plays into the defense, you saw how fresh TJ Watt looked at the end of the game. You don't see that too often with the Steelers. At the end of the game, TJ Watt over the past several years, a few years, has been tired at games because he's been out there a lot because the Steelers were losing the time possession battle. But what happened in this game? The Steelers dominated time possession. They had the ball for 35 minutes and 36 seconds compared to the Falcons' 24 minutes and 24 seconds. That's over 11 minutes of having the ball more than the other team. It allowed the Steelers to keep the Falcons in check. And again, we're going to get to the offense in a bit, but I think a big part of that was the fact that the Steelers in general were pretty decent on third downs. They didn't score a touchdown, and that's bad. And we'll talk about why I think that was. But them extending drives was huge in this game. The fact that they were able to only have 1 3-and-out the entire game. Actually 2 3-and-outs. I take that back. They had 2 3-and-outs this entire game compared to where last year they 3-and-outs were like coming. You were lucky if you had 2 3-and-outs in a quarter. I think it was a good sign for this team can play the way it wants to play and be able to win football games. Now, they can't play this way and win all the time and just only get field goals. That is not going to work in the NFL. But in this situation, Russell Wilson unavailable, Justin Fields has to step up. You're playing a team that you feel confident that you can shut them down. You go in, you stick to the script, you win with the script, even with some very egregious officiating. TJ Watt has 2 sacks taken away from him. Sack fumbles, by the way, taken away from him. The second one I thought was a legit call, but because of the other egregious mistakes, it kind of just added on. Like, well, you can see that one, but you can't see these ones over here. TJ Watt's first sack would have kept the Falcons completely off the board from scoring a touchdown in this game. Clearly was not offsides. The still pictures and images that have been shown have basically shown, yeah, he moved before the ball, but he did not cross the line before the ball, and that is not a penalty, and it should have been given back. On top of other penalties like Najee Harris getting his whole helmet ripped off by the face mask by Jesse Bates, not called. George Pickens with an offensive pass interference penalty on what was a very light push. And it's like, if that gets called, that better be called all season. And we know that it won't be. But I thought the really impressive thing was through all of that, through the calls, through the Steelers losing their punter, for getting hit after he got a kickoff. You never saw this team panic. You never saw them waver. They just kept finding answers. They kept fighting back and staying focused and staying on point to the mission. I think that was a very good sign for this Steelers and in the maturity that it can show to win football games. Now, again, they got to score points. You got to finish drives. You got to be able to do that. That's going to come back to bite you against better teams. But this is a Falcons team that a lot of people thought should be favorites over the Steelers. They were favorites over the Steelers in Vegas. We talked about how are they going to contain these playmakers? How are they going to contain that defensive line? They did both of those in spades, I believe, because as we'll get to the offense, I think the offensive line played a big role. But there's no doubt TJ Watt, the destructive force that he's been, should have had 3 sacks in this game. Will come away with officially 1. But I think anyone that looks at him, Raheem Morris said, hey, we want to make sure that he can't wreck the game. And, well, he sure as enough wrecked the game. And again, the overall composition of this team, Donte Jackson with an interception, could have had 2 interceptions. I thought he had good coverage on other plays. DeMonte KZ looked solid. DeShon Elliott with an interception. That's, again, why I think this team could end up being very good this season, is that I think this defense has a lot of the right pieces in the right places, and they have a really good chance to be elite all season long if they're able to stay healthy and the offense doesn't force them to stay out there. But we do got to talk about that offense. I do want to talk about Justin Fields, how he did, what's Russell Wilson's status, Arthur Smith, all of that. We'll get to all of it. Trust me, Steelers fans, right after this first break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. Special deals you can get all through September is betting on Caleb Williams to get just 1 passing yard every week in September. That's right. You could boost your Prize Picks all month long with an automatic win by just saying, hey, I think Caleb Williams will get more than 1 passing yard in a game, and you can stack your wins all month long. Now on Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as making 4 correct picks. Prize Picks includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, and so much more. Download the Prize Picks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's code LockedOnNFL to get a $50 bonus for just playing $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. What's something you've always wanted to learn? As an adult, do you have time to make time to learn new things that you'd like? Or was that something that you lost in your childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes responsibilities just get in the way. Whether you want to get into gardening, learn a new language, or even just get better at something that you already know how to do, it's important to tap into that curiosity for you to grow as a person. That's where therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back-to-school era can come at any age. Therapy has helped me understand how making sure I'm always learning things helps my mind stay fresh and ready to tackle life's everyday problems by being ready on all angles. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows life can be busy and stressful, so it's designed to be suitable for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here on a Victory Monday podcast as the Steelers again have beaten the Atlanta Falcons 18-10. By the way, Steelers in a very good position to take a serious leg up in the AFC North. We know the Ravens lost the opener to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bengals lost to the Patriots. Didn't entirely see that coming, 16-10. And as I am recording this, it is early third quarter, and the Cowboys are up 20-3 over the Browns. Actually, it looks like it's about to be 27-3 because they just scored on a punt return. So looks like the Cowboys are running away from it from the Browns right now in their own stadium. That's pretty good for the Steelers. Going up 1-0 in the entire division. That's a pretty good leg up. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about Justin Fields real quick. Now, again, if you recall Friday, I told y'all, hey, this is very much up in the air. Justin Fields could end up starting. This could be really bad for, or not, this is not going to be really bad. Sorry, I'm looking at this Cowboys-Browns score. That is really bad for the Browns. But Justin Fields, I think coming in, there was a wonder, like, okay, is he going to be able to play, play well? He's not been running with the ones since Russell Wilson came back from his injury. How serious is Russell Wilson's injury? I do think that's a serious question at this point. How bad is Russell Wilson hurt? Now, he was in pads. He was allowed to be the emergency quarterback. But I do wonder if the Steelers were like, hey, this guy did run with the first team offense in Justin Fields for all of training camp. If there's a backup quarterback situation to have to embrace, is this the one where you could feel like, hey, let's go make sure that Russell Wilson's healthy so that when he is back, he's ready to go? That might have played into it. Now, Russell Wilson didn't light it up in this game, but he also, I think, did the role of the backup quarterback. He didn't lose this game. He kept the Steelers on schedule for most of the game. Again, as I said in the previous segment, they were 8 of 17 on third downs, and like at least one of those third downs was them kind of intentionally just trying to run out the clock with their last possession. So I mean, just under 50% officially there. They were like 36% on third downs last year. That's just a reminder of how how the Steelers had been when it came to possessing the football. And again, the point of that to make sure that the Steelers defense isn't gassed by the end of the game. The Steelers, remember, last year ranked 20th in time of possession, just under like really halfway of the game. They were averaging 20 minutes and 28 seconds. And really that only jumped up in the second half of the regular season last year when the run game started to come alive because the offensive line was playing better. So for me, looking at that, I think that the Justin Fields did the job of the backup quarterback. But there's no doubt here, the Steelers were very much limiting what he was going to be able to do. He did connect on his 2 deep balls that he threw. There were 2 targets he had over 20 yards. Both were connected. Really should have had 3. I thought the push off they called on George Pickens was little soft. But I'm going to show you the passing chart here. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on audio right now, as many of you do, and thank you for all those people who check us out on all our different platforms, I'll explain it to you. Basically, the large chunk of Justin Fields' targets were under 10 yards to either sideline. And That's very much a familiar script. There was not one target he had over the middle of the field in this game. And that is definitely not by accident. That is definitely a design. But I also think, again, I think this week, it was part of the game plan. Because what did we say was one of the biggest things the Steelers had to avoid? They needed to avoid Jesse Bates being able to make a play. They needed to avoid Justin Simmons being able to make a play, letting those safeties who are really good safeties get a chance to be able to make big plays and be difference makers for the Falcons. They didn't let that happen. And Justin Fields didn't turn the ball over in this game. And yes, he was 17 of 23 for 156 yards. That's not all that impressive numbers-wise. He did rush for 57 yards on 14 carries. Again, I think that's a big part of what he brings to the table. But still, you're sitting there, and if you're a Steelers fan, you're just a little worried about that offense, right? And I can feel you. I feel your anxiety there, considering where the Steelers have been on offense for the past several years. And scoring 6 field goals never cures it. Now, I will say this. While we're talking about Justin Fields, Chris Boswell could very well run for mayor right now and probably win with the way that he played in this game. 6 field goals he makes, tying his career record. And by the way, he came in and punted for Cameron Johnston when he got hurt. That's also not a good thing. Mike Tomlin said that is a serious injury, and it looked really nasty. The Steelers may end up having to go get a new punter, which is really unfortunate because Cameron Johnston was looking really good as the Steelers punter in preseason and in this game. But again, offensively, I think that this was intentionally limiting what they were trying to do because they didn't want to turn the ball over, because they trusted, hey, this defense will do enough to keep the Falcons off the board. This offense, all they have to do is get a certain amount of points, keep the defense fresh, and this game will be theirs. And listen, it worked out. Now, that won't work all the time. There's plenty of times where I do think that the Steelers are going to play some better offenses next week. That might not be the case with the Broncos. But when they play the Cowboys, you're going up against CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. That's going to be an elite connection. That's going to be a tough. That's not going to be as easy. It might take a little bit, but I think this was a starting point for the Steelers offense. And again, possessing the football goes a long way in this game. Also, I'll say George Pickens. I thought he showed a lot of really good things. He got open. He made plays. 6 catches on 7 targets for 85 yards. Really should have been 7 of 8 for probably like 105 yards based, or maybe even 115 yards based off the one deep ball they took off of him. But I also thought it was impressive because that between that call and the attention he was getting from the Falcons, you didn't see him lose his head once. And I think he showed really good maturity, and that's what you want to see out of this guy, not just playing like a number 1 wide receiver, but acting like it. I think that he certainly fit that billing there and beats the narrative that that some have said he's a loose cannon. And look, he's had loose cannon moments. There's no doubt about it. But I think that he certainly did his job in this game there. But again, back to Justin Fields. You look at how this game played out, and you're like, hey, he did his job. That's fine. But I know there's some people out there because they really want Justin Fields to be the starter because he's young and he's athletic. And look, he is exciting. He can uncork a good deep ball. He is really fast when he gets on the move. And he's young. He could, if he works out, he's the future. I get all of that. That makes a ton of sense. But you look at this game, and I do have to wonder, if Russell Wilson's in there, how many more big plays do the Steelers get? Are they as cautious? Do they trust Russell Wilson more to do some of the things here? Is he on time? Or because I'll also say Justin Fields did have mistakes in this game. It wasn't like he played complete mistake-free football. There were a couple sacks that he didn't have to take. There were a couple incompletions where he missed wide open guys. Van Jefferson was wide open at the sticks, and he just threw it, wide of him. Najee Harris was wide open with a ton of space. So I kind of get where, hey, if you're looking at this, Justin Fields, I thought it was an okay start. Like when we do our grades, I want to look back and try to see, how he actually performed. Y'all know I do stars and skulls. We do those on Tuesdays. So we're going to do a lot of film studying tomorrow to try to figure that out. But I really thought Justin Fields, if this was a grade, I'd give him a 1 star, based off of him being able to keep things on schedule, do the backup quarterback role. That's a good job. But based off of what I've seen from Russell Wilson, I don't think that's enough to keep Russell Wilson from being the starter. I think that if Russell Wilson is back and fully healthy, and he tells you he's fully healthy and he can be good to go, I think Russell Wilson's going to be the starting quarterback for the Steelers, and I don't think it's really that much of a it's not a controversial thing based off of what they've seen so far. I do think that Justin Fields again showed, hey, I can do this. If you give me the job, I can continue to develop for you. And that's a good thing. You wanted to see that, but I think overall, I think you still want to see Russell Wilson get to run this offense. And, I have to wonder, how serious is that calf injury? What's that like? Will we end up seeing Justin Fields starting for the Steelers next week against the Broncos? Maybe we will, and maybe he does better there. But by and large, I still think this was a solid performance from him. Nothing groundbreaking. But at the same time, you want to see what this offense will actually look like when it gets going. If it ever does this year from Arthur Smith. But I want to talk about Arthur Smith a little bit more, and particularly about the offensive line in this game, because I talked all week about how this could be the liability that hurts the Steelers. It absolutely was not, and that deserves kudos to the Steelers offensive line, but also I think to Arthur Smith. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is also brought to you by Game Time. Summer's winding down and fall is pretty much here, which is a great time to see live concerts, football games, and get ready for the MLB playoffs. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that lets you get tickets for your favorite live events without it being any harder at all. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff so that you can see incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Right now, you can find a super deal when you search for the Backyard Brawl when Pitt takes on West Virginia in Acrisure Stadium this Saturday, September 14th at 3:30. Pitt taking on West Virginia. It's going to be a huge game. Lower bowl seats I've seen for as low as $130 each. That is a great deal for what is going to be a ruckus environment, and yours truly will be there covering it for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So get there by getting your tickets on Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I love their feature called their Super Deal, where you can find the best seat for the best price, whether that's front row at a concert or club seats at the big game. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue the Victory Monday podcast here on the Locked On Steelers podcast as the Steelers coming off their 18-10 win over the Atlanta Falcons. They are 1-0 on the season, headed to Denver next week. And Denver right now, as I'm recording this late in the third quarter, is down 3 points to the Seahawks. I'll take a look at that later to get a sense of how they're playing. But let's talk about this offense a little bit more and Arthur Smith. One thing that I said, and if you remember on the Friday episode, I asked Arthur Smith this on Thursday actually it was at Steelers practice. And one thing I said was he was going to have to do some work to try to make things easier on this offensive line. What I meant by that was calling plays that didn't put all the onus on the Steelers offensive line to have to do everything to dominate, to make the Steelers offense work. And whereas the Steelers offense didn't exactly work, they didn't put a whole bunch of points on the board, they also weren't a liability. And I think that the Steelers offensive line played a big role in that. I think Zach Frazier had a pretty good game outside of his first bobbled snap. I thought he controlled his spot really well. I thought Broderick Jones played really well. I thought Spencer Anderson played pretty well. I got to go back and look at the tape. These are just kind of live notes that I made in the game. But I thought across the board, the Steelers offensive line won the line of scrimmage. Najee Harris, only 3.5 yards per carry, 20 carries, 70 yards. Justin Fields, 4.1 yards per carry, 57 yards on 14 carries. Cordero Patterson, 3.3 yards per carry. Just Jaylen Warren, 3.5. Nothing dominant, but when they needed to move the ball, most times the Steelers did in this game. And I thought that was really impressive by the Steelers in how they were able to move the ball consistently when they were getting there. When they got in third downs, they won a lot. Some of those, especially with third and shorts, and they were able to win most of those. The one time I thought that the offensive line did get beat across the board was the quarterback sneak, where I think that the Steelers just took too long to snap the ball, and it allowed the Falcons to kind of guess the cadence and get a jump on that. But by and large, I think the Steelers offensive line held up pretty well. I got to go back and look at things for more looks on the protection, but I really thought that the protection was very solid across the board. I thought the 2 sacks that Justin Fields had were kind of him holding on the ball, trying to do a little too much and not getting out of the way of the pressure. But he was not under siege in this game, and that was one factor we talked about could be a problem with Grady Jarrett, with Matt Judon, with the guys that the Falcons had on their defensive front, and with Raheem Morris, a defensive-minded coach who was going to try to send pressure after him. And Justin Fields was allowed to be on schedule for most of the game, be in rhythm, and I thought that was a big part of this offensive line. And it's not saying that the offensive line has arrived. It's not saying that they're ready to be elite, that Broderick Jones has emerged. But you know what? It is saying that for a week 1 start after what was a very bumpy preseason, this unit came together and did its job to help get a win. And that's a very big positive for the Steelers, in my opinion, when you look at what what you want this trajectory of this team to be. You want this team to be able to go out and control the line of scrimmage. You want them to possess the football. And here's the thing. If they're able to do those basic parts, like this is the foundation. It's week 1. Everyone's starting off with a fresh start. Everyone's trying to figure out who they really are, unless they're, teams that are well established with coming off of, previous really successful years like the Chiefs or the Niners or the Ravens right now. But you look at where the Steelers are, new offense, very young offensive line, new quarterback, a lot of new things. And in a game where their backup quarterback was the main option here to run everything, they were they played well, and they kept it together. And I think they gave a foundation for, hey, if this is the floor of what this offense is going to be this year, with no touchdowns but not turning the ball over, it's a pretty good floor to work from. And then you could get up, because again, you can win games like this. Now, you can't win all your games like this. You're not going to beat the Chiefs like this. You're not going to beat the Eagles like this. You're not going to beat the Ravens like this. But you probably could beat the Broncos like this. You probably could beat the Commanders like this. You could probably beat, honestly, the way the Browns look right now, they did just score a touchdown on the Cowboys, and it's about to be 27-10 Dallas. But being honest, I think you might be able to beat the Browns like this at some point this year. Now, you don't want to. You want to be able to be a little bit more comfortable in your wins. But if this is the foundation you're building from, where it's like, hey, we got a sense of things we could do. We tested out some things. Let's build off of this moving forward. I think that's a good place to be. And I think the offensive line played a big role in that. Now, there's still several big questions about this team. Who's going to be the quarterback next week? Is Russell Wilson going to be is the offense going to look different with Russell Wilson than it did with Justin Fields? Is he going to be trusted to throw over the middle and give guys a shot? Pat Freiermuth, the guy who signed his extension. By the way, we didn't get to cover that because it happened after my Friday show, but I thought that was the right move. As I told y'all, Hayward, Freiermuth, book it. They were happening. They happened. But four catches, 27 yards, not huge numbers. But again, I think that was part of Pat Freiermuth's main part of the field that he works is the middle part of the field. That's where the Falcons' strength of their defense was. They avoided it, made it easier on the backup quarterback, just like I think Arthur Smith made it easier on the Steelers' offensive line with some of the run calls that they had, the quick passes that they designed up. They didn't ask them to do a whole lot and have to be an elite offensive line in this game. They just had to be a decent one, and they were. And I think that's a really good positive for the Steelers to figure that out. Now, again, doesn't mean that they got everything figured out. They still got to figure out more parts of this passing game. You look at this passing game, 6 catches for 85 yards for Pickens, 4 catches for 27 yards for Freiermuth, 2 catches for 13 yards for Warren. Everyone else got like 1 catch for less than 10 yards. That's going to come back to bite you if you don't have other targets worked into your offensive system. But again, that's what we're talking about. The floor that they're at for week 1, getting a win. Can never get too mad at a win. I think that this is an okay place for the Steelers to be starting. And I do think this is a good sign that they will get better throughout this year. Again, if they're possessing the football, dominating time of possession, winning third downs, and they're able to build on that with maybe a few more big plays, maybe a little bit more, synergy in the offense to build off of successes that they hit on. I think all of that could make a really big difference for the Steelers as this season moves on. But again, as far as a lot of people are going to have complaints, but the bottom line is it's a victory Monday, and the Steelers are 1-0. And if this Cowboys-Browns score holds up, they hold sole possession of first place in the AFC North through 1 week, up a game on everybody. We know how crazy this division likes to get. that could this one game edge might end up helping them if they're getting down to tiebreakers later in the season. We'll see if they can maintain it this week. They've got the Broncos. We'll get you prepared for that all week long here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday. Breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're going to do our best to get Stars and Skulls ready to go for tomorrow so we can get you our grades for the Tuesday episode. But for everyone else, I hope you had a great weekend. We'll see you all week long here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.